Into basketball by association. I clicked record a little too quickly. My name is Arky Shea. That is the ever dapper and highly coiffed Mr. Joel C. Cortez. Joel, hello, sir.
It's not working, everybody. It's not working.
That's okay. It doesn't have to work.
Let's just go home. I'm going to take my ball and go home.
Come on. Are you requesting a trade already?
I'm requesting a trade. And once I get to my new location, I will promptly request a trade 3 weeks after saying this is where I want to end my career.
You know, I appreciate that sentiment, but I also appreciate that, I'm going to try to get as much bang for my buck as I can on the return. So you're not going away for 10 cents on the dollar.
I will be traded for a copy machine or nothing.
I am bringing in Matt D'Agostino or Bo Estes. Just throwing those out there. Those are trade bait pieces I'm throwing out there for you. So just
hey, man, if that means I get to go work at NBA TV or TNT, is that really hurting me?
Okay, listen, I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm just trying not to hurt me. That's the goal here. Like you're just a side piece in this.
That's fair.
Joe, we haven't spoken in about 7 or 8 minutes. Since then, the Celtics have gone down multiple times, just like you predicted, as well as the Grizzlies are white hot. They have won 2 games in 2 weeks. So, Mr. Cortez, before we get to all that and something else, how about you tell me who this here podcast is named after?
All right. Well, first you got to guess. This is episode 159, but there is no NBA player. There's no NBA player who has logged 159 career playoff games. But because this is our show and we can do whatever the hell we want, we're going to retroactively go back to 158. We missed naming that, at least along this convention, for the last show because we were honoring Walter Davis. Rest in peace. So there are 2 guys in NBA history who have logged 158 career playoff games. One is Klay Thompson, who is in a massive, massive, massive slump right now. And I love Klay. I don't know how you feel about him, but I love Klay Thompson. I hope he breaks out of it, but I'm not going to name it after him because this other guy is just that much more accomplished. There's no way we can get around this, and I'm 99% sure we have never named an episode for this gentleman yet. Could be wrong. Who cares? It's our show. We can do what we want. So this guy is a Hall of Famer. He's a 10-time All-Star. He was 94-95's Rookie of the Year, but that was a co-Rookie of the Year. That was the only time in NBA history that's ever happened. He's a 5-time assist champ, 6-time All-NBA. He won an NBA championship in 2011. He is a 9-time All-Defensive player. He's on the 75th anniversary team. He will most likely still be on the 100th anniversary team if and when that comes about. Any guesses yet? Otherwise, we'll get into career stops and that sort of thing to give you some clues.
Man, I'm trying to even think 94, 95. Who's coming into the league right then? So, give me the first team.
He went to the Dallas Mavericks, where he played amongst a rising trio of youngsters that was, at least the way the NBA wanted to position it, about to take the league by storm. They were across all the magazine covers. They were on a lot of the video games, that sort of thing. It never actually panned out in wins and losses, but all 3 went on to have very good careers. Just not as good as this guy.
Can you give me one of the youngsters there with the Mavericks, and that'll be the last clue I asked for before?
So one of his running mates who had a stellar career, Jamal Mashburn, though it was truncated by injuries, especially at the beginning.
Jamal Mashburn.
The other guy, now if I do this, you're going to have only one to choose from. Okay. So,
no, don't tell me the name. Just tell me the team.
Well, his Dallas Mavericks.
Team. No, the other guy sorry. The co-MVP, I should say, his first team.
Oh, the co-MVP was...
It'll help me narrow my years down.
The Detroit Pistons.
Okay.
And wearer of one of the most iconic jerseys of the era that purists in Detroit hate, but most other people love.
Oh, the Flaming Stallion. I like
the Flaming chest piece stallion, hot rod stallion, which I do have hanging down in the bar here.
I get to see it. I get to see it almost every week. It's not up there behind you right now. I don't know why.
It's not up there. No, it's actually in a case. We kind of rearranged things here. during the off season. So yeah, the cases are in a different spot now.
Okay. So 94. So that's 94. So in the 94.
This is good content, by the way. People just love to sit and wait to see what Arky will choose.
May or
We're
may
5
not know
minutes in.
They may or may not know it now. Okay. I'm trying to figure it out. Okay. This is our show. Okay.
Yeah, it is.
All right. 94, 95. So we're probably those Pistons. Okay. Okay. I'm thinking Grant Hill is the Piston.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So he's one of the co-MVPs.
Mm-hmm.
Dadgum. Who was
co-rookie of the year? Not MVP,
sorry. Co-rookie of the year. You're right. Co-rookie of the year. So who co-rookie? That seems like such an interesting tidbit of history that I should know.
The second place this gentleman played after, oddly enough, so he was that good, his team was that lauded, but he was traded from the Dallas Mavericks after 2.5 seasons and went on to play in Phoenix for 5 years, went to New Jersey.
Okay,
for
I got you.
7 seasons, actually.
I thought he was younger than this. Okay, so that's Jason Kidd, right?
It's Jason Kidd, Jason Kidd. Went back to Dallas, won the title in 2011.
97-98 kind of guy. That got that wrong.
Finished out with your New York Knicks, and he is the owner of one of my favorite insulting nicknames of all time. Early on in his career, he was referred to as Asen Kid by fellow NBA players. Why? Because he's got no J.
That's pretty solid. I like that. All right, so this is the Hall of Fame, soon to be Hall of Fame head coach Jason Kidd episode, who also happened to play a couple years in the league before becoming one of the best head coaches in the league ever. So again,
nobody spills a drink better than Jason Kidd. Nobody.
I listen. You may not like this worse, but I'm gonna say it out loud. I think Jason Kidd's a prick. So I hope he hears this episode. I don't like him. I've never found anything likable about that guy. And you're not the only person who's shared that sentiment throughout his career.
And he didn't get off to the greatest start head coaching wise when he was machinating, not behind the scenes, but right out front and center for other people's jobs.
I also think he was a prick to the media when he started becoming. I don't know if he just had a chip on his shoulder or whatever it was, but I just don't like that guy. So that's all right. He's not Kyrie levels, although
I will say this about Jason Kidd. You got your money's worth watching the guy on the court as an assist man. Though his teams didn't always win until late in his career, he was probably miscast as a first or second option when really he should have been a delivery system. But if you're going to be taking that high in your rookie of the year, that's the way it goes. And this I will say about Jason Kidd as a coach. He has not been afraid to experiment with completely against the grain ideas. Sometimes they're so out there and they don't work, and other times he's been on to something. Whether it's been inverting the offense when he was in Brooklyn and he played with his guards inside and his bigs outside. In Milwaukee, they tried to build that massive front line in the early days of Giannis joining, and they had 3 7-footers up front and the guards were all long. It was insane, but he's done some really interesting things that he's thrown at the wall in addition to his drinks.
All right, so Jason Kidd, I hope we do you proud of this episode or not. I don't care. Screw you.
Yeah.
So here's the episode anyway. Joel, I'm going a bit outside of the box for some news that was reported this morning by Chris Haynes of Yahoo, and I don't know if you've seen this.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. This was probably reported before we started recording, about 2 hours before we started recording. He's reporting that Russell Westbrook. You heard of that guy?
Oh, I did see this report. Yep.
Russell Westbrook has requested that the Clippers let him come off the bench and start with the starting 5 to try to build some continuity. That's a very sweet request of him. I don't know if you've noticed it's about the Clippers. They are winless since they got the big man that Steve Ballmer wanted to be able to get over here.
Objectively terrible is the word you're searching for. Yeah,
I think that is a fair thing. They've lost 6 in a row. They're 3-7, and Russell Westbrook is like, can I help? Can I get in the lineup to help you out a little bit?
So they were 3-1 before they traded for Harden.
So, Joe, I just want to get your thoughts on that before, because that's some of the more pressing and breaking, maybe not pressing, but breaking news as we start this podcast. I just think it's interesting that Big Russ is like, hey, can I help you a little bit?
So good on you, Russell Westbrook. And it does exhibit a change in Russ that has been at work for a couple of years now. It was evident last year. It was evident the year before, even when he was in Washington. And this is, I think, him coming to grips with where he is in his career and probably having seen some writing on the wall. As things were deteriorating, things didn't go the way they were supposed to in L.A. with the Lakers. I think understanding that he can't do it all, he needs to fit in, that Russell Westbrook is no longer a system, but he needs to fit into a system. Are you listening, James Harden? So Russ, by all accounts, has been a great teammate over the last couple of stops, even with the Lakers, where things weren't always going the way that he had hoped. But he's genuinely been supportive of other players, instructive of younger players. The chippiness that Russell Westbrook had against seemingly everyone has started to diminish a little bit. He's not playing, less hard or anything like that. It's just he's being less of a prick, to take away the quote you had with Jason Kidd. And Russ absolutely was one through much of his career, especially as things were winding down with OKC, as he got to Houston, as he started to churn through some of these teams. So I appreciate the gesture. I don't know if it solves anything, but I like where his head is at. They've got a lot of mouths to feed in that starting unit, especially with James Harden now arriving, a guy who is not a system and will not fit into your system because he is a system. Well, guess what, James Harden? The system's broken. You are a player in decline. Teams cannot build around you anymore or cater to you, but here's Russ catering to you. But to put Terrence Mann, a guy who will knock down a shot here or there, but really is more of like a 5-tool role player, into that starting lineup, allows James Harden a few more shots, Paul George a few more shots, Kawhi Leonard a few more. Does it also take some of the onus off of Russ to go, hey, whatever problems we're having, this is not my fault. I'm not in the starting lineup anymore? Maybe. But I like the gesture. I like the effort. And it shows something where the coach didn't have to come to him and sell him on it. He didn't have to sit in a media session and do the old passive-aggressive, well, he's the coach and I'm not, so if that's what the coach wants, I guess that's what I'll do. He didn't have to do that, so I appreciate that. We'll see how much it fixes, because I don't think Russ is the problem. It's James Harden. But he did just get there, and there is a lot of stuff to work out, and they did get him for basically next to nothing, a bunch of role players who they really were no longer using at this point. The only thing I'm a little worried about, Russell Westbrook goes to the bench. He's going to play point guard. Terrence Mann goes into the starting lineup, and now Bones Highland does what? Slots back to the third-string point guard? He's too talented for that. He's a gunner. He's undisciplined at times. You probably can play Bones and Russ together, but both of those players are better with the ball in their hands. But again, so is James Harden, and here you go. You've added one too many of the same type of players to the Clippers, and it's costing them.
Yeah, it's I thought, listen, I was the one that was sort of advocating to get him out of Philly to Los Angeles because I thought that's where he wanted the most to be able to go. So
it's the only place that would take him, right?
It did turn out to be at that point, but also thought that Philly, like if there was any chance to get out from under him, it was going to have to go put it to the Clippers. Yeah. And it's just not working. And again, we're 9-10 games into the season, far from technically over, but there are a lot of big holes there. You see when they're sort of all on the court at the same time. And listen, with Russ together, like with Russ as well as James Harden, as well as Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, there, I don't know the numbers, but the handful of times I've definitely paid attention to it. It seems like it's more efficient. It seems like it's the best option as far as what they have to be able to be more competitive and to be able to pull out close games like against Denver. But I don't know, man. I was skeptical beyond. I think James Harden just makes me skeptical in general anymore, just because of all the focus that he takes away from sort of and it's weird. Like, we defended him for so long, and he still gets those like nice assist numbers, and I can't square it in my brain. It's just one of those weird, like, when you have a puzzle piece that's supposed to fit in a spot, but maybe the manufacturer cut it a little too big,
right? Or the dog chewed off one of the little nubs at the edge. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and you're like, it's just supposed to fit, right? Like, it doesn't quite work in my brain puzzle.
And then that puzzle piece has the gall to tell you, I don't fit into this puzzle. The puzzle fits around me.
That's right. Hey, let's talk about a very cold team right now, and that's your Minnesota Timberwolves. They are losers of 1 in a row right now. And Joel, I got it. Because it's your team, we have to ask you first. How good is this team, man?
Better than expected.
That's the I can take that's the bare minimum. But dude, this is a formidable team. I saw a report that there's you have all these. Everybody has like a computer that can project things, right? But when something stands out, it catches my eye. And a couple of weeks ago, I remember seeing that. I think it was NBC Boston, right? Had the Celtics playing in the finals. That's not a shocker. But their opponent was your Timberwolves.
Yeah, get out with that. As much as I love Minnesota.
That's a computer and stuff. But so far through the first 10 games of the season, it's shown that they've been a pretty good team. And maybe the computer believed in them more than most people in their eye test did.
So to understand this year's Timberwolves, we have to go back 2 years. And
I love this setup.
Yeah. This is the classic Joel Cordes. I'm going to, go way too far down the rabbit hole. But 2 years ago, that team had Jared Vanderbilt, Patrick Beverley, Taurean Prince had just arrived, Kyle Anderson had just arrived, and you had a rookie in Anthony Edwards. And the goal was to surround him with veterans, to have guys with high motors who could compensate for the fact that Karl-Anthony Towns, his motor and his focus will wane at times. And that team played with an edge. They had that classic first round series against the Grizzlies. The Wolves kind of took almost like a Grizzlies junior approach, where they were happy to play the heel. They were happy to be loud, obnoxious, cocky, and go after. And they were a fun team. Last year, they trade for Rudy Gobert. They lose a lot of the motor guys. They bring in Mike Conley as well. And they just didn't have a motor last year. They had no real identity. They were trying to make it all work with the bigs. Gobert looked unsure. Anthony Edwards was extremely unsure through the first 25 games about where he would fit and what he could do. He was floating around on offense. This is crazy, but Edwards went like the first dozen games last year without a dunk? Anthony Edwards went like a dozen games without a single dunk. It wasn't working.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, and then Karl-Anthony Towns comes back for a little while. They try to make it work. They just never clicked. This year, with a full off season and a chance for everybody to kind of look in the mirror, and some of the trades that were made, Edwards has stepped up as the unequivocal leader of this team. Karl-Anthony Towns has been very fine in letting that happen, but Edwards is not leading on offense. Edwards is leading with defensive intensity and hustle and just an absolute dog mentality. I think something that he saw in Patrick Beverley a couple of years ago and wasn't real sure how to deploy yet. And all of a sudden it's there. And this is going to be hyperbolic, but the broadcasters are starting to point this out too. And it's not just on the Timberwolves side. It's not just the Homer thing. Anthony Edwards on both ends is playing with an aggression that is reminiscent of a Kobe Bryant or a Michael Jordan, about just trying to embarrass everyone. If you go back to that Celtics game where he takes over in overtime, you see him locking up Jason Tatum, putting Jason Tatum on the ground, stealing the ball, tying it up, and standing over him like, who are you, MVP? And this is multiple times of this now where he is going head to head, and it's not just, hey, Jaden McDaniels, you're our lead defender, and he is good. He's rangy. He's getting better. They extended him. He's part of the reason the Wolves are better. But Edwards is stepping up to take the best opponent at a lot of junctures in the game and saying, I want to guard that guy. And instead of just holding his own, he is being incredibly disruptive. And now on the other end, you take that with a guy who clearly can get to the cup, who is an above average 3-point shooter. the light bulb is starting to go on about where to get points. And watch Anthony Edwards in the paint, because he's got the Kobe MJ fadeaway jumper from the baseline now, and he's been deploying that with some regularity. It's coming. You add in the fact that Gobert is very comfortable with what's happening, and the defense now is funneling towards him. Towns understands better how to fit next to Gobert. I still think Towns is the weak link, but I've seen a lot of progress from Towns on the offensive end, and even defensively, he's continuing to compete. Then you've got other guys in Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's a plus defender. Mike Conley still is. Jaden McDaniels needs to make an all-defensive team. Obviously, he can't get thrown out of games like he did the other night with the Warriors, but he should be on an all-defensive team. Kyle Anderson, above-average defender. They've got him, and those guys are following Edwards' lead. They're swarming around the ball. They're flying. They're getting out in transition. They are fun, but they're fun on the defensive end first. And that, I think, is what the national media hasn't really picked up on yet. They're saying, oh, look, they're the number one team defensively. Yeah, all right, we'll see if that's sustainable. Oh, but they're so fun because they have Anthony Edwards and Cat and Gobert. No. They're fun because of the way they're locking people down. And that hustle is then turning into points. So can they be a championship team? No. Is this sustainable? I think so. And what it also signifies is Anthony Edwards going from star of a team or rising star of a team to now unequivocal alpha A1, the guy on a team, but also one of those players that the league wants to celebrate and showcase nationally. That has not happened to the Timberwolves since Kevin Garnett.
I think that last point is a great one, but I do think also talking about this next step, if you had a player that was going to be, some guys, even unless you're LeBron, right, or Kobe, your first couple of years, you're figuring out the league. And
well, even Kobe. I mean, remember Kobe had a couple rough years too.
No, it's fair. It's fair, but I mean, as far as here's the expectation for you, like it's completely different level for Kobe and for LeBron coming in. You get it maybe a couple of years to sort of you just can't still put up numbers and sort of figure out where you land, and then you start to get your feet under you, and then you find out, can you make that next step? And it feels like Anthony Edwards has taken a massive step early on this season. He is a force. And we've talked about it for a couple of years on this podcast about how fun he is to watch and how energetic he is and how he is the guy that the league's going to need to get behind and push soon, because he is the type of guy every bit athletically on the court, like what a Ja Morant was, what NBA was wanting to be able to push with him. He's got every bit of that intangible, that it factor, as well as being able to play on the court and be super good. I'm so impressed with how much it's flashed bright early on the season, because I want to talk about another team in just a second that has the opposite going for them. But during their winning going on early in the season, they've beaten a couple of pretty darn good teams. I mean, they've been able to put down Denver and pretty impressively. They've been able to put down Boston and fairly impressively. Like this is a team that isn't just kicking down tomato cans.
They had the hardest schedule in the NBA to start in those first 10 games.
They are really impressive coming out the gate. And you're right. The sustainability, I don't know. Maybe it looks like it can be. The pieces feel like that they're kind of melting together at the right time, or not, I should say right time, but to begin this season after they had that transitional phase, it seemed like figuring out who worked well with what and why. But yeah, they're a really, we were going to talk about some of the teams that are fun to watch. That's a fun team to watch, man. I'm with you. That is a very enjoyable team. I've caught 2 of their games so far. I caught the one against Boston most recently, and I was really impressed.
That honestly was one of the and to do it at home. And yes, the Celtics were missing Derek White, but I just want to throw this in there because we don't have a lot of these in our franchise history. That was one of the signature games in Minnesota franchise history as far as a regular season game that's really fun that people will talk about, because that was one of those moments where you go, yep, this Anthony Edwards kid, yep, everybody on board. Let's go. Let's go.
That's right. Didn't shrink in a big-time moment against a big-time team, against a team that wasn't going through their huge losing streak. They're the one that caused the huge 2-game losing streak.
Yeah, they started it.
Yep, that's right. You had so little faith the last time we spoke that Boston would lose, and one of those teams would be to your Minnesota Timberwolves. Nate, I say to you.
I just want to say one more thing on Edwards real quick. The difference to me is that the light bulb has gone on, and this speaks to your point about it takes a couple of years for most players, and it did for LeBron, and it did for Kobe even too. It did for MJ as well.
Right. Just the expectations were different.
Yeah. But to take all that talent and the opportunity and the expectations, and for the game to slow down and for them to go, I know who I am, what I can do, and I know how best to deploy this within my team while letting other guys eat, get them going. I'm going to need their help, but it still has to come back to me and I have to take over. I still have to be the leader that guys will rally around. When Edwards first came into the league, he would throw himself into the lane with wild abandon, similar to John Morant, Derrick Rose, whatever. That would work sometimes and it wouldn't. And there'd be the times you're like, dude, just take the pull up, just take the floater. You don't need to do that. Then last year, there was the uncertainty of where do I fit? Like I spoke, he would just float around the perimeter, not knowing how he was supposed to be moving with Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns. That was as much a coaching thing as it was an Anthony Edwards thing, where it's like, hey, if you don't know that, then be that much better on the defensive end. Get rebounds, do the little things. He didn't have that yet. And this year, what you see is a different guy who's figured it out. And he's rocking the original Timberwolves uniforms, the white ones that have come back. It's reminiscent on some of these dunks of how J.R. Rider was like the first Timberwolves player that many people nationally even knew about because J.R. Rider won the dunk contest in those unis. And all of a sudden the Wolves are relevant again, and you've got a guard. Anthony Edwards is already the best guard in Timberwolves history. Like he already is, 3 years in, the best guard the Wolves have ever had in those uniforms. And there's a huge movement from the Minnesota broadcasters and a lot of people in Minnesota to go, you know what? Let's turn the clock back and make those uniforms the full-time ones going forward. They're clean, they're fresh, they're unbusy like the rest of these. Let's just do it.
Yeah, most of these older uniforms are just way too much. These for Minnesota, not that way. I agree. I'm not against that. Other team I wanted to bring up that's just barely ahead in the standing is the Dallas Mavericks, and they've been really good as far as winning so far this season. In fact, they're one of those teams that when we talk about fun teams to watch, they're pretty fun. They put up a whole bunch of points. They're second in the league in scoring. Luka's playing out of his mind to be able to start off this season. But my question to you is this the Dallas Mavericks team I can expect? Or is this the Dallas Mavericks team that's being a little bit of a supernova right now? Because if you go up and down their schedule, they ain't beating great teams. They're beating a whole bunch of cellar dwellers and teams that are trying to figure out their identity right now. So yeah, capitalize on what you can if you're that much better than them. But is that because they are that much better than them? Where do you feel on this Dallas team?
Yeah, I mean, I had picked Dallas to potentially be the worst team in the West, and you had them awfully far down there as well, too. There's a few things at play. It's the weak schedule, but Derek Lively, the second, who we're like, oh, they're starting a rookie at center. How's that going to go? Is that a sign of desperation? Is that a sign of like how shallow this team is? He's raw. He's got a lot to learn yet, but man, is he a nice lob partner for Luka Doncic? He's already doing some of the little things. The kid hits the glass. He's not raw mentally. Like, he understands the game, but I think putting it all together will take a couple years. Any team that's still starting Derek Jones Jr., I know he had a nice game the other night. That, to me, usually comes off as a sign of desperation because how many starting jobs has that guy lost? The bench doesn't look like it was very deep, but Tim Hardaway Jr. is flame-throwing off the bench right now. Like 6th man of the year locked down if he continues this pace. Luka is outletting at all times and looking down court, not just getting into the offense and making something flashy happen, but he is outletting. They are moving. They're getting down. They went from one of the slowest paced teams last year. In fact, they might have been the slowest. They were down in the bottom 3. I know Miami was down there and so forth, but they're outletting. Kyrie has figured out how to fit in. And here again is another sign of like Russell Westbrook, Kyrie's got a lot of knocks against him, but so far this year, he and Luka seem like they've figured it out. Kyrie is a shot maker. He is the secondary ball handler. He is not the offense initiator, but Kyrie Irving is running the floor on fast breaks. Luka is finding him on outlet passes. They've got Grant Williams, who we liked a lot in Boston in a supporting role, and it was like, how's he going to fit as a starter? He's been phenomenal, except in a shooting slump over the last couple of games, but really helpful for them. So this is not a team, Arky, that's going to win 3 times for every 1 loss, which is the ratio they're at right now. I think this is a slightly above 500 team once they get up against those more talented, deeper teams. Any type of injury to this Mavericks roster is big time damaging because the depth just isn't there. But I like the way they're playing, and they've had a cohesiveness that I really doubted was going to be there based on what we saw last year. And this is kudos to Jason Kidd, to Luka, to Kyrie for making those adjustments at the top. And I like what I see out of that group where you go, oh, okay, Luka and Kyrie might actually be able to play together long term if Kyrie's head is on straight and he's cool with this type of role, because Luka's going to make him look good. And Kyrie still is a phenomenal shot maker, right? And a phenomenal secondary ball handler. That hasn't gone away.
Yeah, he is putting up essentially the same numbers he's put up every year that he's been with, but he's doing it in like 5 or 6 fewer minutes than he's sort of ever played, which is kind of interesting to sort of pay attention to in the first 9 or 10 games of the season, is what sort of, this turns into, right? Because I'm not 100% sure where I feel on Dallas yet. Now, you had him finishing 13th in the West. I had him finishing 10th in the West, so right now second's better than all of those.
They won't be there when it's all said and done, but they probably aren't going to be 13th or 10th.
I just don't know how good this team is, and I'm not
8th or 9th feels realistic, doesn't it? Like,
let me look at their schedule real quick just to sort of tell you the types of teams that they're bidding up on. So Orlando, Charlotte, they're losing to teams like Denver, Chicago, Memphis, the Clippers, the Pelicans, who are 500-ish. They split with them. The Wizards.
Orlando does have a winning record, but that's really the only other one you've named so far.
Yeah, so like I'm trying to figure out if they're beating the teams that were worse than them because those teams are just worse than them, or if they're beating them because they're so much better than those other teams. And I don't know if 9 or 10 games gives me enough of a feel to sort of have a great grasp on that, because you're right. They do look a little more cohesive. I'll be straight with you. I haven't watched a full Dallas game yet. But every time I sort of see their scores come up and watch some of their highlights, I'm like, they won again? They just keep winning. This is a team last year that's losing all those games down the stretch. It's losing against the 500 or just right at 500 teams. So to be winning them is definitely a step up. I just don't know how much better they are than everyone else. And maybe they're a lot better. Maybe they're a top 4 seed. We thought they should have been a playoff team last year. And then I don't know how the Kyrie trade submarined them. But that last stretch of the season, you're just like, man, this is terrible. I don't know why it's not working. Maybe it's just having more time together. I don't know.
I'm a big believer in the eyeball test when it comes to chemistry for teams. Are they excited for each other? Do they celebrate each other's victories? Do they high five? Are the veterans talking to guys? Are they receptive to that? And that is something that I haven't seen from Kyrie Irving in a long time. He's been aloof, right? Ever since he went to Boston, very aloof from what was going on. Yeah, he'd get his numbers, but just didn't look like he was really a part of those teams. And in Cleveland, it's hard to say. They were bad until LeBron got there. And then it was LeBron's team, and you never really paid attention to Kyrie.
And then Dallas, at the end, Kyrie became more aloof.
Yes.
Maybe the beginning of LeBron, it wasn't too bad. But at the end, it was definitely, Kyrie sort of felt like this isn't my team. So,
and I will say it's been 3 games since I've seen Dallas. So if this has changed and you're a Mavericks fan, forgive me if I'm being inaccurate. But in the games that I've watched so far with Dallas, Kyrie's body language is completely different. And this is where, again, I speak about maturity. he is in everybody's ear. He's part of the pregame huddle. He's leading pregame huddles. He is talking to guys. He's picking guys up off the floor. He's high-fiving. He's engaged. And it looks like he's having fun, and he's part of the game. He's part of the team. And that's great to see for a guy who needed that so badly in order to save his career. And again, is this just him putting lipstick on a pig and the same old Kyrie's going to come back out? You could have said that if he was still fighting for his contract, but he got his contract, right?
Yeah, he did.
He got his contract. So
I did not think he would get it. Not with Dallas, and he did. So
no, and I would have doubted it the same way if it was a contract year, but it's not. And so I'm a little bit more of a believer in what I'm seeing. And Kyrie, as much as we bashed you, good on you. And if you can be a big help to this Dallas team that needs as much help as it can get in order to keep Luka long-term and to play to their potential, that would be phenomenal if it happens.
I will tell you this. I do not believe in Kyrie completely. I still have ill feelings toward him. But I will allow for I will allow for the fact of this. Let's get more of a sample size in between, sort of, getting his way out of one place into another. The way last year's submarine, still don't quite know why that was in the beginning of this season. I need more from them to think that he's going to be that great teammate. But I do think it's fair that you pointed out so far he's been that guy that's been very into the team day to day in every single game and in those good moments. Which is definitely a difference from what we were seeing when he was having his aloofness. Like maybe he had an emo phase, right? Maybe he just wanted to.
He just needed the haircut to let us know.
It's not really the burning sage in the locker room emo I was thinking of, but maybe he just had to figure some stuff out to be more cohesive with people, as opposed to just sort of be this philosophizer. They had to be able to speak on these greater issues that he probably had very little knowledge about.
To your point about why they submarine last year, I think it was lack of cohesion, both by the arrival of such a new piece and a type of piece that isn't a perfect fit with Luka. So there was a lot to get through. Then you had the injuries. It's late in the season. That was a Dallas team that never really had much of an identity to begin with. And now you're asking them to shape a different identity on the fly. It's so similar to Minnesota and trying to fit Gobert and Towns together and Anthony Edwards not knowing what to do. NBA players are just like people. We want certainty. We want predictability. We want to understand how we fit into things. And an off season, especially if everybody's heads are on straight, and especially when you can get that hierarchy of whose role is what, it makes a whale of a difference. And I do think that's the difference for Dallas now and Minnesota too.
I want to talk about something really interesting right after this. And I know we don't have a ton of time to be able to get into all this, but I do want to just briefly, if you'll just tell me why Draymond is choking players on the court in 2023. The same guy that's very interested into, kicking people in the ding-dongs is, we've said 1,000 times, this is Draymond Green is an enforcer. That's really what it was. And I don't have a problem with him defending his guy, but I do think it was kind of interesting that it was pretty quick on. By the way, that was after your Minnesota team was beating the snot out of him for a couple of games. So sweeping that. One of those was in the play-in tournament, right? One of those counted as the play-in tournament game.
The second one where people got ejected was the play-in tournament game. Right. So 2 minutes in.
So
or the in-season tournament, not the play-in. Yeah,
I think people know what this point. Again, if Bones Highland doesn't know, none of us know. By the way, did you see what Steph Curry said about the play-in tournament? He said, if people would just read, it's pretty simple to understand. And then he went on for like 30, 40 seconds trying to explain it. He's like, everyone plays in these groups, and then the groups play into a bracket, and then the bracket breaks off and goes into, the tournament in Vegas, and then games that get made up who don't make it into the bracket get made up. He's like, it's just very simple. I'm like, dude, it spent you 45 seconds to sort of be like, it's super simple. It's not that simple, but anyway. What's your thoughts on Draymond Green?
It really depends on how familiar with soccer one is. If you're familiar with soccer, it's simple. If you're not, then it's going to be something new to you.
I know. It was just like, you guys are so dumb. Let me spend 45 seconds explaining this to you. It's very simple. No.
Yeah, so a punk move by Draymond. I think the 5 games is appropriate. If you're going to restrain Rudy Gobert, who's rushing in there, not swinging, not pushing, not shoving, Rudy Gobert was kind of rushing in there to separate people. And Gobert and Draymond Green in the game beforehand have been going at each other a bunch. They are not friends. This dates back to the Utah days for Gobert and all the times that they would run into Golden State. They don't like each other. So there's not good blood. The previous game had been rough. The first 2 minutes had been rough. It was physical. But yeah, there's no need for a guy who's coming to separate to choke him, to essentially jump on his back, piggyback style, and try to wrestle him to the ground. Like, if you're trying to restrain him, grab him by the waist, grab him by the arm, shove him out of the way. Get
the throat, Joe. Go for the throat. It's basketball.
Right. But again, to do it with his back turned, it's a cheap shot move. The guy can't defend himself. It's ridiculous. Like, that's
by
one
the way,
of the
took
worst.
Him a long time to let go too.
I think it's one of the worst looks for Draymond that he's had in a career filled with worse looks. This is worse than stomping on guys or the nut punches or stuff like that. Because again, this comes after all those things have already happened, and the league is looking for it, and to do it that much out in the open to a guy who, up to that point, has not shown himself to be an aggressor. He's not taking a swing at your guy Klay Thompson. If Rudy Gobert is in there throwing punches, yes, grab him, choke him and restrain him. That's different. That's not what Gobert was doing.
It's not what anybody in the NBA does.
No, and he wasn't showing that was the case. He's rushing in there. So again, shove him out of the way. Get a 1-game suspension. Get in between them. Get a no-game suspension, but maybe get kicked out. Like, don't just jump on the guy from the back and then try to choke him. Like,
I was stupid. A little surprised it was just a 5-game suspension, to be honest with you. Like, I thought that was looking at, like, you started probably 10 and then maybe you negotiate that down to 7 or 8 or something. But for it to start at 5, I was, especially when Steve Kerr was like, I'm cool with this. Like Steve Kerr had no problems with it whatsoever. Again, no problem with defending your teammate. Just a little issue starting out going with the MMA moves.
I think Kerr is okay with it because it wasn't 10 games. It's like 5 we can handle. But I think the context plays a big deal there. Like, yes, Draymond, you should know better. And because of the history here, maybe you should get more than 5. But the heated nature of the game before, remember, they had played each other the game before. This was a back-to-back, a home-and-home back-to-back. The way the first 2 minutes started out showed that it was going to be a thing. And it was a bang-bang play where Gobert is rushing into a scrum and Draymond lost his temper, lost his cool. It's different than you're in the course of a normal NBA flow of offense and all of a sudden Draymond is punching someone in the nuts or somebody falls down on the floor in the course of the game and Draymond steps on him. Those things completely out of the flow. And while this was not the appropriate response and is ridiculous, it was within the flow of what was happening. So I get 5 games. I think 7 or 8 might have been good. But at this point, what message really matters to Draymond? We don't even know.
No,
we don't even
messages, know. Like, it could have been a 30-game suspension. It's not going to change who he is. So this is just, and it's who he's always been. And it's not to say that he's particularly a thug. It's just his style of basketball, his brand, where he went to college. Like all of this has made him just this thick, big, bruising guy who his skill set is essentially a strong, tough enforcer now at this point, and especially since his skill set is diminished so much at the end of his career.
Yep.
Like, this is kind of who he is. This is what he does to sort of earn that paycheck. And again, he's defending dudes. He's defending his dudes, right? Like his dudes that he's been going through with a long, long time. So it's not like he's defending, like, not that it will ever be a thing. Like like he's not defending Rui Hachimura like that or something like that, or God forbid before Jordan Poole. He's defending. He's defending Klay. So, all right. Last thing I want to get to before we get out of here, we talk more about the fun teams. I just want to get your thoughts on the screenshot of where we are in the West right now. The top 6 teams, if we were going to give those guaranteed spots going into the playoffs, are Denver, Dallas, Minnesota, OKC, Houston, Sacramento. So, the the way the West has always been. Speaking of talking about these fun teams, like there's like all 6 of those teams have been really enjoyable to be able to watch highlights of and to be able to see some of their games for. This is what we talked about, I think, before the season started, that there's going to be a lot of interesting movement at the beginning of the year. And this West team, the teams that we thought were down and low last year and the year before, we're going to see some serious contention from them. And so far, early on, OKC's giving that to you. Houston's on I think a 5 or 6 game winning streak right now.
6.
Sacramento, they still got the 6th spot right now at this point, but they're a team that blew up last year. Dallas is resurged coming into the season. Minnesota popped up a couple years ago. Now it seems like they're back. I mean, outside of Denver, this has just been a very fun, topsy-turvy, very unpredictable first 10, 11 games of the year.
Here's what's crazy, though. As much as things don't feel like what we predicted, and they don't, and it's early, and there's a lot of movement, there's really only 2 teams in there, Dallas and Houston, that most people were like, we'll see about playoffs. You look at the teams that are not in the playoff field right now. The Clippers, we went through their problems. The Grizzlies, they're missing Ja way more than we thought. And they're, a lot of us thought they'd still be a playoff team. But the field really isn't that different from what we predicted. It's just some of the teams that we thought would be in the play-in side of things are sitting up in the top 6 right now. And here's where it's just so early.
Those who are playing in are Los Angeles, Phoenix, Golden State, New Orleans. The Clippers are still a couple spots below that at this point. Memphis is the worst team in the West right now.
The Lakers will figure this out. There was a lot to figure out with new faces, and they've had a ton of injuries. Phoenix has had injuries to their big 3. There's a ton to figure out there. That entire team is almost new, and you have a new head coach. So they will get that sorted out. I like you said, I like these new teams that are here. They've all been fun. I think they all have staying power. I think the field, as we're seeing it right now, is probably what we'll see with the top 10, but the Clippers should get back into it. It'll be a major disappointment if they don't. But we're about the same. You look at the Eastern Conference in the same way, and as much as things are like topsy-turvy, is like, oh yeah, Boston and Philly are at the top. Miami's in 3rd. Good for them. But Indy up at 430, one of us predicted that they were going to be really good.
They only average the most points in the NBA. That's easy.
They are so
score
fun.
More than everybody.
They are so fun. And I texted this to you the other day while watching them. I was like, this may be the first time since the ABA days that the Pacers, a team with its name, Pacer, that sounds like it should be a fast-running kind of fun type of team. This is the first time they've been fun since the 70s because, they've had good teams off and on throughout their history, but none of those good teams, including the Reggie Miller, Rick Smits era, Steven Jackson and Jermaine O'Neal, you get to Danny Granger and Paul George and Lance Stevenson, David West, those guys, Roy Hibbert. None of those were fun teams. Those were all like gritty, tough, defensive-oriented teams. This Pacers team is fun.
They're 7-4 in 6 of their 11 games. They've scored at least 130 points.
Yes,
they've scored 150 plus twice.
And they've given up 155 to Boston, I think it was, and they've given up 143 to somebody else along this. So it's just, and this is a Rick Carlisle team that's playing like this. That's what's so amazing about it. But anyway, it's not just the Pacers. You look at the top 10, Atlanta, Orlando, Brooklyn, Cleveland. Those were all teams that were like, they probably should be in the playoffs. Should Cleveland be that low? No. Will they get it figured out? Hopefully. But we all kind of saw Orlando was ready to maybe be in that fringe group. Toronto is hanging around there. We don't know if they'll be there. But I guess, long story short, as surprising as the West seems, the East is showing us too. It's the NBA. Who you think is going to be there, by and large, usually gets there in the long run, with 1 or 2 aberrations once an 82-game season is done. And as you've pointed out many times before, in the playoffs, it's even more so. It kind of shakes its way out that who we thought would be there at the end probably is. So super early, but I'm enjoying this season so far. It's been really fun.
I am too, and I think as far as shaking it out, it's just I don't know if Houston has staying power, but I'm enjoying them watching them play so far. OKC, I think that was probably of the teams that were the lower end of the play-in or not in the play-in last year when you're considering who might be capable of that. That was probably the team we thought, getting Chet Holmgren back and stuff would be like sort of a big deal with them, and he's played really good. That team is. I don't know if a lot of people know the entirety of their roster, or even more than maybe a player. Like maybe I say the over under a number of players people know on OKC at 1.5, and I think most people would go under. That team is dynamic.
That starting five is fire.
Yes,
they are.
I think if people get a chance to see them more and more, because football season, I know it absorbs a lot of attention for people, and I get that. So once you get Christmas Day and start getting into January, February, I think you're going to see a lot of people look at this Oklahoma City team and be like, have they been like this all year? Be like, yeah, they've kind of been like this all year. They're a really fun team. That front five is extremely competitive and fun to watch. And that's probably
oozing talent that fits together. Just oozing talent.
That's fair. That's one of the predictions that's worked out well for us with OKC. Although I still wanted to have OKC. I had OKC at number 11. So I said just on the outside looking in. I'm smart. You had
here's a brain teaser for you, and I don't know the answer to this. Do you think if Chet Holmgren doesn't get hurt last year and they've got that starting five together a year early, with Josh Giddey, who really came on the scene last year, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, you got Jalen Williams, it was his rookie season, Lou Dort, and you add Chet Holmgren to that group. How many spots better do you think they would have been last year with Chet already? Because it really feels like having his dynamic shooting ability, his shot blocking ability, his finishing ability has just unlocked so much more for everyone else and is allowing them to shine. And Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is a legit, I don't even want to say fringe MVP candidate. He is a legit MVP conversation candidate, and he was last year already too.
That's a really good question.
Like Lou Dort is a all NBA defender, maybe on third team, if that existed, second team at least.
I can't say that it wouldn't have been more positive right now, to be fair.
I wonder if they jumped 3 spots last year in the West. Maybe that's too much. Maybe it's only 2, but we see how much they've jumped. And again, it's early and they're 8-4. It's 4 games above 500. But from what we're seeing, yes, the bench has a long way to go. Everybody on that team is young. Everybody. So there's going to be nights it doesn't work.
Last year they were 40-42. So if they win, let's see, if they jump, so that put them they ended up being 7, 8. They ended up being like the 9th seed, right? The play-in, I think. So could they have gained 4 games? Depending on top 4, but say 5 games would have safely gotten them in the top 6.
Yeah.
Would they have been 5 games better? I think they probably would have.
I think so too. I think that's reasonable.
And that's safely in the top 6 from last year. So, yeah, I don't think that's outside the question. Yeah, I'm going to go back and look at their schedule and be like, that was a 4-point loss. That could have been a win. Just go back and be like, there could have been a whole bunch of different things there.
Granted,
let's get in our time machine. Let's go fix Chet Holmgren.
Having the ability to take that red shirt year, we've seen for a lot of different guys. No, you don't never want it to happen, but Joel Embiid, Blake Griffin are some of the biggest names for it. It's been helpful, especially for bigs, to be able to have a year to put some weight on their frame, to get NBA strong, to watch a lot of film, to be able to get in and yeah, they can't do a ton of work when they're rehabbing, but to be able to work on skills and I think the understanding of the game improves a lot. And Chet has benefited from that. So he is a better player now, I think, for having sat that year, but still, had he gotten all that NBA experience last year, who's to say?
You're right. And maybe, he has to deal with his fair share of minus 27s, which, by the way, the Knicks gave to Victor Wembanyama a couple of weeks ago. But anyway, y'all don't want to talk about that, to the Knicks are the team that gave him the worst plus minus of his career at that point. So
I'm sure he'll have his revenge at some point.
I say that like he's kind of a bad player. I think Joel Embiid just had like a minus 25 the other night, so it's not. It probably won't taint his entire career.
They happen a lot more often than you think. If you pay attention to plus minus, Like so much of that is dragged down by what lineup you're in and all that sort of thing.
I'll leave you with this. Joel Embiid has only had 6 times in his career that he's been a minus 25 or worse. 3 of them against the Boston Celtics. And that was his most recent minus. I think he was minus 27 or minus 25 or something in that game.
Well, when you see each other 4 times a year, it's the same thing with the Knicks and the Sixers. Like you do have an inside edge, I think, against your divisional opponents. Those games take on a different meaning. It's the same way, like when Minnesota beats Denver and people are like, oh my gosh, they beat the Nuggets and it was such a good game. It's like, yeah, it was, but they see each other 4 times a year and they've been playing each other tough for a few seasons now. Like
that's okay. That's okay.
Those are tune-in worthy games. Like don't miss the Nuggets and the Wolves, for example.
They are too. How about this? We just did an entire podcast. We weren't talking about the Celtics or the 76ers or how good the Miami Heat are right now.
Or the Lakers.
Or the Lakers. Not really the Nuggets either, too. Look at that. Are we talking hoops beyond just the top level topics?
That's the dream, baby. That's the dream.
That's what Jason Kidd deserves on this episode, you prick.